This conference will now be recorded.
And Karen Sportini, you're going to do the roll call?
Yes. So we have Tom Dillon.
Here.
Tom Evans.
Here.
Greg Riley.
Here.
Peter Wood. And Rich Tallberg. Okay, we have Suspita. Mary
Present.
Dean. Okay.
Thank you. So we are accessible to the public. I want to make sure that's on the record. Oh, here comes Peter.
Okay.
See if Peter's coming in. Peter, if you can hear me, you take your microphone off mute.
I can hear you.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, Peter.
Okay, Peter Wood.
Hi, guys.
In attendance. Okay. So just about to start, and I wanted to again assure everyone that this meeting is accessible to the public. Right? Town staff, someone can.
Yes. Yes, it is. The public is invited to call in.
That's affirmative. Okay. Okay, so let me start with just a few comments, please, and then we'll get down to the work of this evening, which is going to be to go through our findings. The first thing I want to say is that it's been 6 months since we've had a meeting, and I'm sure we've all missed each other. I've missed you, and I hope everyone has coped with the situation in their own personal ways. It's been difficult for many. And so I just hope that everyone's health, mental and physical, is sound. We have not been meeting as a committee. We haven't met as a group in 6 months. The last full subcommittee meeting was March 3rd. Tom Dillon and I had a working group of open space on March 12th. And that was the end of our meetings. We do need to approve minutes of those 2 meetings that I just mentioned. It's not on the agenda. Meeting, you cannot change the agenda, so we'll just hold that formality for our next meeting. So I just want to remind everyone that, you know, our mission has been to gather information about facilities that exist, that could potentially exist on the Shakespeare property, whether they be outdoor performance venues, whether they be multi-purpose facilities that include stage and facilities for the performing arts, or if just parkland and open space, did some facilities there. So what I want to emphasize is that our job has been to gather information, not for the purpose of making a recommendation, but for presenting information so that other town bodies can decide what action to take. So before we go, I want to thank everyone for all the work that they've done during this time. And you'll see a fair amount of work. I want to also mention that one of our subcommittee members, Tom Evans, is also working on a separate endeavor, which is a potential development for the property. It need not be named. I don't want it to be a distraction to this group. It has nothing to do with this group. And what's important is that Tom has assured me that his work on this subcommittee will be objective, and he will help me make sure that we present everything in an equitable way so that we are not advocating any particular outcome. Evans, you agree?
100%. What's best for Stratford is the most important thing.
So thank you for continuing to stay with us and help us pull this presentation together. And I consider it my responsibility as chairman to, when we come up with a final product to present, that it is equitably presented, that we talk fairly about the various scenarios, and we don't come across as pushing one over the other. I want to be as objective and fair as we can possibly be. So those are my introductory remarks. And let's get a quick update from town staff. We had made I made a request to see if there have been any improvements made to the property since January of this year. And before the pandemic hit, we were also talking about the fact that a survey might be done and a phase 1 review might be done. So those three things, if someone, Susmitha or someone on staff could give us an update.
So, Greg, this is Susmitha from Planning and Zoning. I reached out to Renee in Department of Public Works, and she mentioned that there have been no improvements done to the property to date, and they have been focused on other things during this crisis. And there was nothing budgeted for this year for the property. And like I said, other things took over precedence, so we couldn't proceed as planned on the other items that we discussed.
If I can mention, Greg, I believe I sent you an updated note. If you could please comment on that. I sent you an email following this morning from the mayor, because there have been some improvements.
I did not get that, Mary. I'm sorry. I've been checking my email all day.
Okay, I sent it this morning because when I saw Renee's note, I asked the mayor to please, if she had anything to comment on, and there was something they were doing, and I guess I'll just have to follow up and send it tomorrow because I forwarded it to you, so I didn't print it out. I apologize.
Well,
And then you did get the A2 survey, correct? So
yes. So what is an A2 survey, Susmitha?
Greg, before I explain to you what an A2 survey is, I just wanted to let you know that Renee did mention about doing some electrical work or planning to do some electrical work on the property.
Right.
Hasn't been done yet, but they're looking to do something. But she didn't give that in her email, so that's why I couldn't,
Yes.
you know.
I did see that.
narrate it.
I did see that.
Okay.
Sorry, I did not see an email from Mary.
no, I think it had to do with the electrical, and that wasn't mentioned, so that's why I think it was.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mary, for all of your diligence in helping get that information. Okay, so someone's taking notes. I don't need to take all the notes. That's good. What is a phase 1 review?
Well, it's a preliminary review of the project.
Of the project. So we don't have a project, so that's irrelevant, right?
Well, typically in planning, we call what we're doing right now as a project.
Oh,
Quick question, Susmitha, isn't a phase 1 often indicative of an environmental review of phase 1?
Yeah, if that, you know, if it involves environmental assessment, we have phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments that are, you know, conducted on a property. I thought he just asked me in general what a phase 1 means. Phase 1 is
Right.
usually the first step in the process where you do a preliminary analysis. Phase 2 is more detailed analysis.
In a planning process, you mean?
In any process, even for environmentals, it's the same thing.
Okay, that's where I'm
These things
familiar
are-
with.
these are not really exactly on our but earlier in the, you know, in our earlier meetings, some of us, you know, interested to know, you know, what could be done between, let's say, then and whenever something might be developed, if anything. You know, in other words, could the ball keep moving along so that things could happen more quickly? I think that was the interest in just knowing what what would need to be done and could anything be done sort of in the immediate term.
To that point, Greg, if at any point the town involved a developer, it would be important to have a phase one ESA conducted so that those results could be available to them. And the town would probably be the one responsible for conducting that. They aren't expensive. They're typically under $5,000 to $10,000.
So would it be appropriate that a phase one, and I would ask this of Peter or anyone or Susmitha, would it be appropriate for a phase one review to be done at this time?
That's a question I would defer to Mary Dean. She's the department head.
I think what we would do is, I don't think it's up to this committee to determine that. I think I would talk to Kelly Kerrigan, an environmentalist, and find out from her if she thought,
Exactly, right.
yeah,
Okay.
but
Right.
there was a request for the A2 survey. That was something that RDA,
Yes.
everyone was looking for.
Thank you, and that is done. That is now in the files. Committee members, I received it yesterday or today. I'll share it with you all. Okay, so let's see. Next item on the agenda is to review the subcommittee's research findings in preparation for the presentation to the town later this fall. So you all have a copy, you have a PDF, whether it's on your computer or printed out, so that I think we should flip through it page for page. And it shouldn't take too long, but it'll take a little bit of time. But this is, we can't meet on the side. So this is the time. This is what I'd like you to focus on, Tom and Peter. And what we're about to look at, what should be added to it, presented to the town, what should be changed, or even maybe we have too much stuff and what should be omitted. So those are the three things. What should we add? What should we change? What should we omit before we present to the town? That's kind of the way I'd like to focus this. And so why don't, Tom Evans, would you be willing to lead us through a page by page?
Sure thing. So page one is obviously the title page, and we've included a draft not for release note on that page, Shakespeare Subcommittee Research Findings. Page two is the mandate of the subcommittee, and we would love some feedback from the town to make sure that we are clearly stating this when we hand the document over. So the town of Stratford and Mayor Laura Hoydick charged the Shakespeare Subcommittee with providing research to the Stratford RDA in consideration of potential projects at the former American Shakespeare Theater site. I think that's all fairly clear. Where we did get into a breakdown of the types of things we should be looking at. Greg and I, had both been thinking separately about these topics. So the question becomes, do we need a more thorough description of what these things are to help the RDA, or will they have a pretty decent idea of what these different categories are when they get this presentation? So that's probably our first open topic. Do we need to describe what an open space park project is, what an outdoor performance venue is, and what the small and large capacity multi-use facilities are in more detail? Or do the names speak for themselves?
I took a look at this and I felt like the names spoke for themselves.
I don't disagree with you, Tom. I do. I think that there is having done a ton of research around all of this, there is a lot of difference, even in the venues that we've displayed in the deck, in what makes an outdoor venue, for example, right? So everything from that concrete stage at Elizabeth Park to the Levitt Pavilion. So I think that we've probably covered the gamut in all of these categories, given a fair range of different size venues and stuff. But I'm happy to not do the descriptions unless, Greg, what's your thought? Do you feel like they need more color?
Well, did you think about a space where we could add, let's say a 10-word description of what we mean by multi-purpose space?
Well, that's where on that page, you'll notice there's description / question mark for each of those.
Okay.
So basically we would just drop it in there.
I guess I'm looking at an earlier version, so that's on me. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does everyone else have a page 2 with question marks and the word description?
Yeah, and so Mary, I should emphasize and ask Mary and Susmitha, please be active members of this meeting because ultimately the purpose is to figure out what to present to you, to the town. Okay, so please, help us and guide us and be active members of this discussion.
So I think that when the RDA and ultimately the town council is looking at something, they're going to want to know what the capacity is, and they're going to want to know what the cost is, cost estimate. That's really a very important factor.
Okay.
We have all of those, but we don't necessarily need to describe what each of these categories means because you already know.
Yeah, I think that's pretty.
I'm a master of the obvious. I love to tell people what they already know. Okay. Okay, so we can move on. Next page.
Yes, we can. All right, so slide 3 is just continuing to carry that forward, and we wanted to give a little bit of color on the task force. So the categories were driven by the findings of the Shakespeare Task Force, which performed surveys and workshops following the fire in 2019. When asked about long-term...
Excuse me. Can you share your screen?
I am going to defer to Greg on that.
So we can see the slides?
I asked that everyone have their own copy so that it isn't put up on the internet as a draft.
I can send you a copy, Susmitha, if that's helpful.
I do have the copy here. I thought maybe for the discussion's sake, we can put it on the screen, but if you want to do this.
I'd rather not for this draft discussion.
Okay.
But I hope you can access a copy on your own. Can you get a copy?
I do have the copy with me.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Yes, Susmitha. We understand that that's a little bit of a workaround, but we're just trying to get some of the ideas locked in before we present it in more detail. So then we just basically talked about how people had responded, that the workshop respondents together between the category of multi-use arts and entertainment / theater / black box / permanent facility was 47% of the respondents. Then on the survey side, 57% of the respondents wanted a multi-use arts and entertainment / theater / black box / permanent facility. And then 18% of the survey respondents wanted an open space and 25% other. And then in the short-term use, there was mention of an outdoor theater venue, festivals, fairs, and open space. Essentially, this is just establishing where our categories came from. Mary, do you think that's fair?
Yes.
Great. Slide 3. So slide 4 is just a couple of notes on the presentation that we thought were critical. So we used the website usinflationcalculator.com for any construction project prior to 2001, just to make sure that we were looking at apples to apples in our comparisons. So none of the budget figures are kind of rounded or anything. They're specific numbers found on the internet or from actual contacts at the venues. And then we would, if it was prior to 2001, we use this calculator to bring them up to 2020 levels. Any venue that has multiple buildings that have been aggregated over time, we tried to create a composite budget as well as listing the most recent renovation to that project and how much that cost. And then on the park and open space side, it's a little difficult to track some of those down because some of those parks are very old, or the budgetary numbers were kind of buried in the park and rec budget for the town for that year. So we estimated where we could, and we did use a formula to figure out a rough cost per acre for operation, which we did include on that slide when we get there. Slide 5.
Let me just say quickly, I want to emphasize that that a calculator has been used to project, let's say, dollar figures from 30 years ago to today's dollars. that it wasn't anyone on the committee's personal calculus. It was an objective calculus that is accessible to all on the internet. And I think that's a good, fair way of doing it. And when we get to the open space section, we may find an area of information that we want to add if we can possibly. So just want to remind everyone to think about, what we might want to add to this report. Open space might be one of those areas, but we'll get.
I have a quick question.
Peter,
I don't know if Tom, you figured this out, or Greg, the projected estimated park operating costs, were those from the sources themselves, or was that some other source that provided that?
It was a formula, Peter. We found, let me jump ahead to that one so I can give you an exact number. I don't want to spitball it.
Well, I remember seeing something. I just wondered.
Yeah, so there was a study in 2005 of operation and maintenance costs of the largest 60 cities in the United States. And they estimated an average of $21,178 per designed acre of parkland. So we ran that through the inflation calculator, which brought it up to $28,000 roughly per acre. And then we applied that back to the acreage of the parks. It's not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, for the town purposes, that sounded high to me, but I'm sure it's quite variable.
It really does depend on what the park has and does, Peter. And, we found that, in some of these places, like for example, we do have we'll get to this, it's on slide 24, but the construction costs of Mill River Park in Stratford were $12 million. That's because they have a lot of bells and whistles that you don't necessarily need to have in every single park across the country. Those numbers are generally very hard to track down online. And I know that everybody also reached out to the parks commissions of some of these groups and still had trouble tracking those numbers down. So I think that we'll get to this, but when we talk about the parks, we just need to figure out, we're probably going to need to bring in a surveyor / planner, Susmitha or someone else, to help figure out what the actual costs of making park improvements in Stratford would be then. So it's a little more open.
I think it's a good point to talk about, and I'm making a note as a potential change or revisions to be made later.
Great. So to jump back to slide 6, what we've tried to do with all of these categories is list the name of the venue, the year it was established or will be established, the location, the median income of that town, the location's population, and then the seating of the theater or gathering space in that venue, the types of work that are performed there or shown there if it's a visual arts resource, the number of large cities nearby, and then the approximate cost of construction, again, adjusted for inflation where appropriate. So the 7 properties we'll be looking at on the subsequent slides are the MAC, the Willits Art Contemporary in Aspen, the Budig Theater in Cincinnati, the Blackfriars Playhouse in Stanton, Virginia, the New Brunswick Performing Arts Center, which was just put up last year in New Brunswick, the Nashua Performing Arts Center, which is being built in Nashua, New Hampshire, and Fairfield Stage, Fairfield Theater Company, the Warehouse, and Stage 1. So then each of the subsequent slides has information about each of those venues that we thought would be helpful for the RDA to look at. So moving to slide 7.
Hold on, please. I want to ask Mary and Susmitha to focus on that slide 6, because this shows, this is the core of the information that we've gathered and are preparing to present. There's, does this meet what you guys are looking for? With, location, median income, population, seating, it's a little bit on programming, some nearby cities, and cost.
When you say cost, I think would be I don't know if we're able to do, the estimated cost of what it is to run it, annually.
Mary, I asked this both respectfully and from a place of curiosity. If the town and the RDA are not running the building, then what is the advantage to them to know the operating costs? And I only say that because depending on what comes into that space, those costs could be variable.
Right, but anybody that's coming in with a plan is going to have a general idea depending on what their plan is. And I think it's important for when the town council is trying to determine what is going there, it's not only the cost of building it, it's then what is the, what is the cost going to be, the general, cost going to be to have the theater run? Just to get an idea of, do they think it's feasible? Is it going to be outrageously expensive? Is it something, I just think that to have a general idea based upon what the plans are would be helpful when the town council's trying to determine.
Okay, so you're
I agree with
suggesting
Mary.
that we wherever possible, we have two sets of costs, building costs and operating costs.
Or I know they can't know, as Tom said, specifically, but just what they're, estimating the operating cost to be depending on what their programming is.
I would suggest these are going to be quite variable. I know from having spoken with the executive director of the Cape, their operating and artistic budgets have ramped up significantly since they first opened. And it really has to do with, how successful that board and staff are at managing their operations. I mean, in this case, they have over 280 events a year, and they basically manage the net operating income from each event and manage it from event to event. Now, it's certainly a valid concern because we all know that the Shakespeare Theater ultimately failed based on it not having sufficient operating subsidies.
To keep it going, right.
Exactly, to keep it going. That also goes to, how effective or inefficient the management was. So, it's a difficult thing, I think, to pin down. And I'm just wondering if a single number is going to be, in the end, very helpful. A larger number is going to look more frightening, a smaller number going to look better. It doesn't necessarily mean that one will be more successful than another.
So Peter, what about, and that's why I said estimated, and I understand your point. What about a general idea of, as the, whatever event space, is being proposed, where they perceive the percentage of funding coming from? What percentage do they perceive coming from donations? What from, like, the bar, or, when people come in, or what do they see as the ticket price, or, maybe a general idea of what the estimated, where they're planning on, getting those funds to run, whatever.
I'll speak to that, Mary, too. And Peter's on the right track. I mean, I think we can absolutely track down an average ticket price for these venues, but it's all very relative, speaking that, like, you don't know what the venue is doing, right? So, for example, I'm sure the Cincinnati Shakespeare company probably has a $45 ticket price, whatever the case may be. And that's for a year-round season of Shakespeare that they offer. Therefore, they're going to bring in X amount of ticket revenue. Whereas the MAC has two smaller community theaters that operate in it that may charge less. It's just, it's not really an apples to apples comparison. I'm wondering if
No,
you might
right, yeah. I understand that. I
ahead.
guess
Let's,
I'm thinking of the when we went to go see the theater in Fairfield, and the manager took us through. He said he absolutely, he showed us how much he gets from donors. It's on the wall. This is what he gets from donors annually, and then this is what he gets from. He said he decided on music because he found that theater wasn't selling tickets. And this is what he gets generally in a year from theater. And then he needs to have a bar because that sale, the liquor sales are significant income for him when they're having their events. So he was able to give us a percentage of where he gets his income from on an annual basis.
let's go to Susmita.
I agree with Mary. I know the cost might be frightening for some people based on the facility size and all, but like Mary said, the town or whoever is going to manage this facility would absolutely know what is the most essential component to this. Like, would the concession stand be an important piece, or would the programming would be a priority first, or fundraising a priority? So I think it helps us to arrive at prioritizing various components of this whole programming and maintenance and everything else.
Tom Dillon.
I have concerns about this line, and I feel like I'm feeling what Peter's saying. That we're getting into an operational detail that's going to be highly variable, different on geographic, just so many differences. And my understanding of what we were up to was to give the council examples throughout the country of different types of venues that are doing different things in different ways, for them to have kind of a list of avenues to pursue with whoever in whatever form. And inside that avenue, whether it's a megaplex or an outdoor theater, an amphitheater, whatever it is, that then we should get into operational details of who's successful and who's not, and how do they make it happen. So I'm concerned about including the operating costs, because I think it will be difficult to get, and B, I need to understand more about why that's relevant at that point.
Well, I don't think the operating costs so much, but where they perceive they're going to get where they perceive they're going to get their operating costs. And I think that's an important factor when the town council is saying, I have this presentation, I have this, and I have this. And this person is counting on 50% donation. In other words, I think it's an important factor when they're gonna, that will help determine them which direction they want to go.
Can I offer one more?
Let me say that I certainly agree that the numbers would be highly variable, but so are the numbers that we presented already, and that we're about to get to. We have various square feet, we have various sizes, we have various programming. We already have a lot of variables in here, so I don't think having another variable would be inconsistent with the work.
Can I offer another direction, Greg?
I'm sorry?
Can I offer another suggestion here?
Well, let me just say that, and then I'll turn it over to you, Peter. That it sounds like what Mary and Susmita want is almost like the business model or the business plan. Not necessarily the costs, the hard numbers, but how it's run. And I know Tom has gathered some information for some of these properties. Like, one of them may be on town land. One of them may be a nonprofit the Kate is organized by a nonprofit organization. And there are different revenue splits and all sorts of different business models. So maybe that's what would be helpful and again, we don't have to cut off this work this month or next month, as far as I know. And we do want to deliver what the town wants us to deliver, if practical, if we can. Even though, it would clearly be variable. It would not be apples and apples. They would not be comparable in many cases, but they would be perhaps provide some guidance to whoever's looking at this report, or at least some information and pique their curiosity, pique their interest. So Peter Wood.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I can't raise my hand. I actually had to do a deposition earlier this week via their software, and even their technicians couldn't figure out why my camera doesn't work. So I'm just going to have to holler in when I have something to say. I apologize.
That's fine.
So we're asking people on the RDA and on the council who have generally, I expect, no particular expertise in this area, right? People have all kinds of backgrounds and work and so forth, but it's unlikely that there's much depth of experience in, for instance, performing arts and, operating nonprofits and raising funds and so forth. So I just think that information, while it will be interesting, I don't know how well it can really be evaluated by the people who are being asked to make these decisions. So what if we looked at it from the point of view of what is in the town's interest and responsibilities? What does the town in each case provide in terms of annual operating or maintenance costs for that facility? Because that's really what I think people need to know. And I inquired about what influence or input the town has. Is it a nonprofit? Is it town owned and run? And in the situation of the Cape, it is town owned, in fact, but they have set up a nonprofit to run it, on which the town has 3 representatives that they appoint. So that's a sort of hybrid model. The town has limited operating support that it provides because it does own the structure, but largely the maintenance of the facility is being handled by the nonprofit and its revenues. So I think that's where it really comes down to, how is the town being affected? I think people want to know, are we going to be on the hook to make this go after the first 5 years, right? I mean, that is where the rubber meets the road here.
That's a very interesting point. What my reaction to that is, just to add, not to take away from it, is that I think the town will be as interested in the viability of the operation, regardless of their, the extent to which they're on the hook. In other words, it's the town's property, and they don't want to just lease their property to somebody without understanding their business model. Even if it doesn't cost the town a dime, I think they want some information about why or how it's going to be successful.
I would,
Evans.
I'm sorry, Smitha, 1 second if you don't mind. So my curiosity along those lines, Craig, would be, is that not the responsibility of each contributing group in the RFP to demonstrate that to the town? So that, as part of the RFP, Mary, if we know that this is information that we need to have from any contributing group, then they have to have their own feasibility study done. They need to have their own business plan analysis done, and they need to come to the table and say, this is how we plan to operate. Comparatively, this is how other groups like ours operate. It should be the burden of proof should be on their shoulders, not the RDA's, in my book. And obviously I could speak to that myself, so I think that's something that we should kind of push back on people that are coming to us with suggestions. Now, if we know that I think that the numbers that we have give us an idea of what is a reasonable cost to build something based on the size and scale of what we want to build, of what needs to be built or wants to be built. That allows us to say, okay, the project that's coming to the table as part of this RFP, these are the dollar ranges for construction costs. To Peter's point, maybe including how much the town is involved from a logistical standpoint is helpful, but trying to dig into how they are successful, if they are successful, I think it's going to open a lot of cans of worms, because there are some of these venues that are entirely paid for by their municipalities. And there are some of these that are federally funded, and there are some of these that are state funded. And I don't know if we want to necessarily establish that precedent either, because then it becomes, okay, well, if that town pays for this, should our town also? And I think we're just opening a lot of can of worms.
Yeah, again, the question is not what information the town council may ultimately want, but what is the role of this subcommittee? So I'm kind of thinking, I'm looking at you, Mary, whether you know it or not, but I'm thinking that maybe we can determine a small set of information or that would be helpful along the lines, and we should probably start moving through the deck. I think we'll see that some of these facilities that are featured, we have some of that information, or a little bit of it. And so maybe we revisit this before we adjourn tonight, and we
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I remember.
And I would say maybe we could come up with maybe, I'm just guessing now, 3 bullet points that would outline the business model, hybrid, public, private, and some information on the programming, and maybe whatever else you guys think would be helpful. In other words, I don't want to just say necessarily, no, this is all you get, Mary. But let's see what's in here, and then let's come back at the end and see what is reasonable for us to do. Go ahead, Susmita.
I think we should move on with the presentation in the interest of time. We just have 15 minutes left, like announced in the public meeting, in the agenda. So I think Tom should just run through the presentation. We should all hold off on the questions till the end and then ask him.
Nobody told me we're limited to 1 hour.
That's what was advertised on the agenda.
I did not. Well, I didn't ask that be put on the agenda. I asked that the start time be put on the agenda. And I'm not happy to be told right now that we only have 15 minutes left, because I thought.
Well, I think we should just move on to the presentation, Greg, and then we can discuss about that.
That's what I was just saying that we should do, but hopefully we don't have to end at 7 o'clock. Okay, let's go. Go ahead.
Sure. Slide 7 is a discussion of the MAC. Again, I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go into on each of these slides, Greg. What we tried to do on each of these was give a visual depiction of what the theater or space looks like, and then some high-level facts about that theater and space. In this case, we have when the theater was converted and how much it cost, we're not sure of. We have some information around the most recent renovation, which is in 2017, which was about a $60,000 grant from the state. Their focus is on music and small theater productions. They also have a gallery exhibition space. When they do theater, they can seat 110 people. And they also have a satellite location that they partner through, which is the Milford Firehouse Gallery. In both of these cases, this was a found space that was renovated, not new construction.
Okay. Any comments on this? Add, delete, change? Okay, next.
The Willits Art Campus, the contemporary building in Aspen, Colorado, is a 240-seat space designed for small local music acts and small scale theater. It will cost $6 million. It should be completed next year. It's a 10,000 square foot building. It has a kitchen, a lobby, cafe, and a lounge, and a small community room. This is sort of the mini performing arts version.
And I'm just going to interject here, Mary. We did hear you loud and clear earlier on in the year, and also when I met with you within the past month, that you were concerned that we find information on not just large facilities but small facilities as well. So we've made a real effort to do that.
Thank you.
Jumping on to slide 9. This is the Otto Budig Theater at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. It seats 233 with a focus on intimacy, keeping the audience very close to the stage. It was constructed in 2018 for $17.5 million. It's a 2-story space with a rehearsal and event space on the 2nd floor, and then the theater, and they present year-round Shakespeare and classical theater.
So I have a comment on this one, Tom, if I may.
Go ahead, Tom Dillon.
So I'm just, my reaction to it is like the previous slide is 10,000 square feet for $6 million and it seats so many. This one doesn't seat that many more, but it's 3 times the cost. So if I was a council person or the RDA, I'd be like, what is going on here? What makes up the difference? And, I know that there's so much information about each one, but that did jump out at me.
So I'll tell you the difference in my research, Tom, is that the one in Aspen is basically a small community center. It's not really a performing arts space. They've invested no money in lighting or sound beyond a basic package.
Okay.
It's not a theater, right? So I would say the difference is that that's not a theater space. Making a theater adds money to the budget. You got to go 2 stories. You got to get your lighting and sound done right. You have to build a stage. It's also in a major metro as opposed to in Colorado in the mountains. So like we said before, so much of this stuff is going to seem extremely variable. It's crazy because I would go on record as saying the next theater we're about to look at it seats a few more people, I believe, and is a bigger theater but costs less money. So it all depends on where it is and how it's being funded and what level of material is put into the construction, what level of technology is applied. All of this stuff, as we said before, is very variable, so that's another reason why, Mary, I think when the RDA requests RFPs, people need to be able to detail where their money is going. If their budget is X amount of dollars, this is how those dollars are being applied.
Well, I won't, delay us any longer, but, before you get to the RFP, the council's going to want to know enough information so they can determine what they want in the RFP. So in other words, a black box is not going to cost as much. A flexible, space. A theater, a full theater will. So it's just having the more information they have, the more they then know how they want to frame the RFP. That's all I'm saying. So.
What just occurred to me is that it sounds like, you're thinking that the council may want almost like speculative costs on, on hypothetical examples, and we were not asked to do that. We were asked to look at what exists.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, for example, when Tom had given the Levitt Pavilion, he indicated that a large amount was donated. If there was a big donor, I'm saying those are the kind of pieces of information that I think would be interesting to the council.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can find a few more in here. Let's go on.
And real quick, Mary, to come back to that, I think that, again, even we have to be careful with even those definitions because they're like a black box can mean very different things to very different theater designers. And you could, even in some of these theaters, there's a $15–20 million swing between just different styles of approach. So, but I'll try to keep in mind on that when I'm looking into some of this other research. So
the other thing is the state that it's constructed in makes a huge difference, whether it's a right to work state.
Right.
Colorado is far less expensive in terms of hard costs than Ohio is. I know that from having done projects in both. So that's why some of these things just don't, they're not really relevant.
Yeah.
Slide 10 is the black Friday. Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Is our work going to help the town sort of put themselves in a direction for one concept or the other? Is that what our committee is going to do? Or is it going to, I'm wary of thinking that we could really help them decide on which, on a lot of specifics. I don't think we aim to give guidance on a lot of specifics, what they want to do. Maybe, I guess I was hoping that we could help the council decide, do we want to go with just open space? Do we want to go with an outdoor, venue, or do we want to go with a structure? So anyway, just another comment from me. Tom, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I think that's an important question to answer, Greg. And I also don't know if even supplying this information is necessarily going to move that particular needle, right? Because some of these things cost, like, let's say in a perfect world, right? There's a park that costs $12 million. There's a theater that costs $12 million, and then there's an outdoor venue that costs $12 million. I don't think we're really helping steer anybody. We're just providing comparables, right? So if this was a real estate deal, we're showing the other houses in the neighborhood. Doesn't mean the houses have the same amount of rooms. It doesn't mean they have the same amount of square footage. They might have more upgrades. We're just telling you what the comps are. And then the decision making comes from there. Now, Mary, I don't necessarily know if it might not make sense in the long term to adjust the mandate of this committee to assist the RDA in creating the parameters around that RFP. Of course, some of us would not be able to continue on in that process, but there might be some value there because the research is in the heads of these people who could be there to answer those questions on the fly for the RDA. But let's talk about that later. We'll jump back into the deck for now. So the Blackfriars Theater in Stanton, Virginia seats 300 people. It's a historic recreation of Shakespeare's indoor theater in London. It was built for the equivalent of $5.5 million. And they do classical and Shakespeare programming. They have about 50,000 people come through annually. Another quick fact that we can probably throw into these things, Mary, if it's helpful, is the average economic impact of these places to their towns. If that's determinable, we can include that as well. Jumping to slide 11, which is the Performing Arts Center in New Brunswick. This was constructed in 2019 for $170 million. It is mixed use, residential, and performing arts. This is the only project we've listed that has residential baked into it. I don't think we're looking at that for the site in general, but it is out there and it does exist. They do not have programming of their own. They are looking to book people into their two theaters, one of which seats 463 and the other which seats 252. Their smaller theater is a black box and probably cost them about $30 million just to do that piece. So they have 3 rehearsal studios, and then they have 200 luxury condos built into the building, which obviously is a lot of the construction costs. I don't even know if this is necessarily a valuable comp or not. If you guys want to take it out, I'm happy to do that.
Dylan?
This one struck me as so left of field that I was going to bring up, should this really be included?
Any comment, Mary, on that? How does this strike you? Or Peter?
Well, we won't do any residential. I mean, that's not part of that won't be.
Would that not be permitted?
No, the deed doesn't allow for residential.
There's no
It's
residential.
only deeded for open space and entertainment. Tom, I had a question. Why wasn't New Haven taken as an example? Creative Arts Workshop, Audubon Arts.
Nothing was purposefully excluded. These are just venues that we've chanced upon. And if you have a suggestion, please email it to me and we'll be happy to include it.
I think it will be good to look at neighboring municipalities. I mean, I like your examples from across the world, but it just gives a point of reference in terms of the scale that we're looking at and the cost that we're trying to manage. It's just comparable, I think, just to look at, like you have Westport example in the slideshow. It'll be, and you have Fairfield. It'll be nice to see New Haven too.
Okay, I think that's a great suggestion for something to possibly add.
What was the name of the theater, Smith? I'm sorry.
Well, New Haven has a whole area in Audubon, and they have the Creative Arts Workshop there. They have a public plaza, and there's the neighborhood music school located there. So it's a nice, indoor performance space. So I think it's a good example to look at. Like,
Okay,
Sure.
so we have possible
Pretty much workshop is
deletion.
more for art and exhibition.
Sounds like we could delete New Brunswick and potentially add New Haven. So now we're in New Hampshire.
Yes. Yes. Sorry. Excuse me. There was one other thing that you mentioned a minute ago that I want to come back to, but we'll revisit that.
Go ahead now if you want.
No, it was just something about the costs to be managed to. We don't have any costs to be managed to at the moment, I believe. I just, I mean, I feel like if there is a model that the town feels is a good fit and they're leaning towards that for whatever reason, that's fine. I just feel like we need to kind of establish that in everybody's minds, because otherwise we're not managing towards anything in this conversation, right? We're presenting a variety of options.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to disagree with you and argue here about this.
No
It's not meant to discourage you from anything, but just to keep things in perspective, like if you're trying to buy a product, you would not only look at the cost of the product itself, but how much would it cost me to maintain it every year? And that's a very natural thinking from, a perspective from anyone. Like if you're trying to, do something, everybody wants to know what is the one-time cost, whereas what is the, multiple recurring costs on this property. And that's the perspective that I want to give. And that's what Mary has been mentioning too, I think, earlier.
Okay, I still am not 100% sure on what, so some of the operating models that we've discussed are not going to rely on the town to purchase anything or fund anything long-term. So we can come back to this. I don't want to.
We're getting too specific, I think, right now. Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add is it's not about the town, how much they're putting in. No matter what goes in there, they want to see it be successful. So I think that's the key, is if they feel that the model for such a type of thing is so costly or not realistic, they're going to be nervous that it may not be successful. And I think, and that's, I'm not the town council, so I'm just assuming that that's the way they're going to look at it.
Right.
Okay. Move on.
I think Tom had a question, Greg.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom Dillon.
I definitely, I'm just going to keep this super quick. I'm concerned about that whole line of thought. I thought we were just showing successful examples in a wide variety of opportunities. And my issue here is that large, small, indoor, outdoor can be done successfully or unsuccessfully.
That's a good point.
And so what do we do?
Yes.
That's my concern.
Aileen, whoever's taking the minutes here, that's a good point right there.
Underline that one.
Indoor and outdoor can be run either successfully or unsuccessfully.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the problem. There's no, if one model was the most successful financially, well, then everybody would do that.
And I don't mean, and I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm not meaning one model like a theater's this, outdoors this. I mean just in general running whatever it is that they're running. I agree that any of them can be successful and any of them can be unsuccessful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
In their own category.
Right. Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that puts, again, the burden of proof back on the people presenting RFPs. So that's fine. I think we're in line there. Okay, so slide 12, the National Performing Arts Center is being built now to be completed in 2024. It's a 750-seat theater. They are spending $15.5 million to build that. So again, here's a drop in money, right? Even though it's a bigger theater. 30,000 square foot building. It's a renovation of an existing space, not new construction. The programming will all be outsourced and they have additional event spaces in the building.
So little information on programming, the fact that it's outsourced. There's a few nuggets in here I want you to notice that do get to the business model. Just a couple of nuggets here and there that it's not consistent, but something to think about. Okay.
The Fairfield Theater Company, thank you guys for doing that visit and getting some more information around that for us. They have 2 primary spaces, the 650-seat warehouse and the 225-seat stage 1. It's a combined 20,000 square feet. It is a renovation of an existing space that cost about $4 million to renovate. They focus on live music and events. The town owns the property and there's a long-term lease. The FTC pays the town against that lease at $2 per ticket, which is about $75,000 a year. And they also use the space for their education center. So that is the sum of our current multi-purpose spaces, both large and small scale. I think including something along the lines of the creative arts workshop in that complex, we can definitely integrate that. I'll look into that. That moves us into outdoor venues. So slide 14 is the title slide. Slide 15 is the breakout of the venues that we have looked at. So it's the Levitt Pavilion in Westport, the Overview Amphitheater in Morristown, New Jersey, which is part of the New Jersey Shakespeare Festival, the Elizabeth Park Theater in Hartford, the Nikon at Jones Beach Theater in Wantagh, which we've already kind of discussed as being a little too big for our britches, but we included it just for the sake of discussion. The Harbor Yard Amphitheater in Bridgeport, the Delacorte, and the Municipal Theater, or the Muni, in St. Louis. All of these have some variable costs. As I mentioned, a lot of these were built a while back, so we've adjusted them for inflation with that inflation calculator. Again, same information basically. We can also include some of those economic development / operating expenses / all those other figures we talked about as we resolve what the best things are to have to present to the RDA. Jumping to slide 16.
Tom Dillon.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, this is probably, I think this is just a little cut and copy, Tom, but on the large cities nearby, Hartford has Long Island towns, as well as Wantagh, New York, Jones. So I'm thinking
that is a cut and paste. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, good little edit there.
Moving a little too fast for my own good sometimes.
And I think we could add Stamford to the Bridgeport line, but that's a little detail too.
Sure.
So that's a good point, and so we'd like to comb through this in real fine detail like that. But maybe we can't right now. So let's see. Thank you for that, Tom.
Are we okay on time?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. The slide 16 is the Levitt Pavilion, which can arrange 1,700 to 2,400 people seated. It's a bring your own chair, bring your own blanket kind of situation. Cost $7 million to do the reconstruction in 2013. It's a live music venue. They also have a children's artist series. They have a 501c3 nonprofit that runs the group, the Friends of the Levitt Pavilion. And they have on-site concessions, restrooms, and beer and wine. Slide 17 is that Greek theater that we've covered before in some of our meetings. It's the Overview Amphitheater is what it's called. It's a half acre of space with a 60 by 30 foot stage performance bowl. It seats about 500 people in open air in 3 sections and 11 tiers. It was constructed in 1932. We don't know for how much. It's owned and operated by the college, so they take care of the landscaping. The space is managed by the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey, who began using it in 2002. And their concessions and restrooms are off-site. You actually have to walk to the primary building in order to use those, and they have no utilities on site. They run electricity from the building to do any lighting for their shows. Not having a construction cost for this, to me, is sort of a boondoggle, right? Like I don't think it's super helpful to not know how much this costs. It's an option for the kind of thing that can be built. As a matter of fact, ironically, I've seen people present plans for the space that have this style of amphitheater, but we don't know how much it will actually cost to do the necessary landscaping and construction. I don't know if Rich has the ability to potentially reach back out, but again, considering it was built in 1932, we probably have no idea Yeah, it's lost to time.
I'll put that under the list of things to add.
Yeah, and maybe we can find a comparable amphitheater somewhere else, Greg, that we can find out the costs of, something that was more recently built. Slide 18 is a very simple pavilion built in Elizabeth Park. It cost $250,000. I think people actually, came from their homes and did it in the park themselves. It's a small concrete platform with an overhang. It's really designed for tiny music and theater acts. They have no concessions or restrooms, no utilities, and no dressing or storage space. This is the bargain basement option, right?
I couldn't even understand what this was. It looks tiny. It looks like
it's very tiny. The stage space is probably like 10 by 15 or so. It's a small little thing. But they had been putting up a temporary stage every year for summer music acts, and this became their permanent solution. And then on the opposite of that end is the Nikon at Jones Beach amphitheater, $43 million in construction. They most recently renovated in 1998. It seats 15,000. They do Live Nation concerts. They have everything on site. This is way too big for what we could possibly build there, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a sense of that. Comparably, it's the Harbor Yard Amphitheater, which is slide 20, which is right down the street. They're doing about a half size of the Nikon at Jones Beach venue. It's supposed to be completed in 2022. They're up to about $27 million in costs now. I think they have overshot their original budget, and that cost is being split evenly between the developer and the city of Bridgeport.
Is there? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, do you want to go back?
Well, I just want to get interject for a second while we're in the middle of this section. Outdoor venues. Is there anything in general that we're missing here, or does it go to the same types of, business model questions? And I don't know. Are we giving enough information? Are we giving the right kind of information for the outdoor venues to be, to be helpful at all?
I think so. I mean, the outdoor venues are a little easier, let's face it, it's not as.
Okay, not as complex.
I agree. I think
Is
I was just echoing what Mary said. I agree that, this information is useful. I think if you were to present to RDA or council synthesizing it by picking 3 or 4 examples that best suit the, site, like, we don't want to compare 27 million project to what Stratford is looking at on Shakespeare. So maybe we can eliminate some of these examples based on their costs and the size.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
a very
outdoor amphitheaters are close.
Tom Dillon.
Sorry. I thought a couple of these examples are very similar to one another. And we could chop 1 or 2 out. Like
I think we can absolutely drop.
Maybe you can explain the difference between the Muni and Nikon Beach, but to me it looks like it's basically the same thing.
Okay, so we're hearing if there are duplicates, we could cut one, and so Smita was saying if one is impractical, like maybe Jones Beach, if that could not possibly be done, then maybe we eliminate that.
Yes.
I do caution us, and Smita, I apologize, but it's come up 3 times now during the call. To say Stratford has a cost limit on this project is dangerous. I believe an acreage limit makes sense, right? If the property is not big enough to sustain something like Nikon at Jones Beach, let's take it out. But again, if someone is privately funding the construction and is privately managing the operation, then Stratford doesn't have a number that we're setting on the project. So I think cutting anything out, like, for example, the Delacorte costs $25 million to build. The Delacorte is not an unreasonable size, shape, or fit for Stratford. So I just want to be careful that we don't jaundice the thinking away from a larger scale project simply because we think the number sounds too big and too scary.
Okay.
Or
That's
short.
a fair point. That's a fair point. Is anything that we have in this deck impractical by size? In other words, if we're looking for something to eliminate because it's it's not feasible for the property. Is there anything that could be cut for that reason?
The size of the Nikon space would fit, Greg, but it's not a practical style for where we are located, the fact that it's in a residential neighborhood, et cetera. I have no problem dropping that. We had just had it on our initial target list. It can absolutely come out.
Okay. And Mary, you seem to agree that
Yeah, it's fine.
Eliminating a few is a good idea. I mean, on that note, I'd also eliminate the, the smallest, which I think would not be satisfactory to most people who want, any kind of outdoor production done
Right.
anyway. So to suggest
I
it,
don't know. I'm caution.
I would
sounds
push
like
back on that.
It sounds like you're making a judgment there, and
I agree with that.
caution against that.
okay.
Yeah,
I appreciate.
definitely would push back on that. It's possible that that's what ends up being decided, and it's not our position to eliminate it. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, you don't agree with Peter or me?
I think large to small, floor to ceiling is what we were charged to bring to the table.
Right, a full range.
Yes, a full range.
Okay, and
I
that's
was
on one
looking
end.
at it more like an RFP. You take out the, the high and the low, but that's fine.
All right. Thank you, Peter. I just, good comment. Thank you. All right, let's move on.
Of course. Slide 20 is the Delacorte, which is home to the Public Theater's Free Summer Shakespeare series. It seats about 1,900 people. The current incarnation was built in 1974 for $25 million. And they have on-site dressing rooms and space for the actors, but limited restrooms and limited concessions. Slide 21 is the Muni. And, to your point, Tom, the Delacorte and the Muni are not that different except in scale and size of audience. The Delacorte seats 1,800, the Muni seats 11,000. So it's just a very different style of theater. The Muni,
I was going Nikon to Muni.
Oh yeah, I mean, except that the Nikon is like design. It's a stadium. The Nikon's a stadium, right? The Muni is just a big outdoor theater. It's a little, but I don't taking Nikon out makes perfect sense to me. We cannot build something there like that just simply because the noise pollution would get everybody angry within a 10-block radius, right? So it's better if we have something that's a little more contained.
Okay.
So the Muni is the oldest musical theater in the outdoor nation. Was built in 1920 for $34 million. Seats 11,000. There are all the spaces around that are available for rental, other outbuildings. They have restrooms and concessions in those outbuildings, as well as on-site utilities and adjacent dressing room, set, and storage. And I misspelled facilities. Sorry about that. So those are our outdoor venues. Hey kids, those are the outdoor venues. So if there's anything that we're missing there, I think we've covered the gamut. I think that the only other option that might be in the middle is something between Elizabeth Park, that tiny little thing, and the Levitt Pavilion. Like maybe there's something that sits in that sweet spot that we should look into. I just don't have that venue top of mind. So if anybody has a suggestion, that would be great. Like Peter, I'm sorry I didn't get the Kate stuff into the deck, but I will add that for our next go through. But if you have a similar outdoor venue in that scale size, we should probably add it.
I did add the Kate to your chart, by the way. I saved the PDF as a Word document and added it. So what I didn't do was to add the photos and, the bullet points that you did for the other venues.
If you shoot that stuff back over, I could throw it back in the deck, no problem.
Yeah, I think I sent it along last night or sometime yesterday.
Did we, Tom Evans, did we not refer to the Kate when we were going through all the theaters? And we
not
did
this go around, Greg. I just didn't have a chance to get it into the deck.
All right, I apologize, Peter. I'm glad you brought it up. You want to just give us a couple of bullet points on the Kate, Peter?
Sure, I'll just read off what is in the chart comparable to all the other venues. So it's the Katharine Hepburn Cultural Arts Center. It was an historic renovation of what had formerly been a town hall and theater that was built in 1911. Town Hall moved out in 2002, maintained ownership of the building. It's in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. The median income of that town is $80,347. Not far different from here, a little higher, only 10,000 population there. The theater seats 289. It's a small performing arts venue primarily. They also have lectures and some educational activities. New Haven and Hartford are the closest municipalities. And the renovation, which was a gut renovation, was done in, again, 2009 for $5.7 million. And I can break down how much of that the town picked up versus, you know, all the other sources. And that was another thing I was going to propose, that if it seems important to get a sense of how these things operate, maybe what we could try to do, and I don't know, Tom, how much of this you've been able to collect, but we could break down these artistic and operating budgets by percentage of where the sources come from for these things. How much comes from ticket sales, how much comes from donors, and so forth. Maybe that's more helpful as a model.
And I think that's the very thing that would be very helpful, because it just would be interesting to see, you know, how they, I just think that would be, if it's not too much trouble to find out that information, to have that included.
Percentage of revenues from sources.
Yeah,
So-
I do have that for the Cape, but you know, Tom, I don't know how much of that you were able to collect already versus having to go back to all these places.
Yeah, and you don't have to go back, Tom. I'm, you know, if you
No,
don't have it.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's better to have the information if we need the information. But I mean, I do think some of these companies may not be an open book with that information. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I would hope if they're not for profit, they would be, or we'd be able to get it publicly somewhere. But we'd have to go back and dig in a little deeper on some of them. I have it for some of the venues, but not for all. So we'll have to take another look. But if we have some more time to attack that, Greg, then we can definitely gather that information.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great concrete suggestion, Peter. Thank you. And thanks for, again, Mary, the Kate was done particularly, it was done later in the game here. But it was done specifically to make sure we had enough of the smaller venues covered. And the fact that it's in Connecticut makes it even better.
Yeah.
So, and thanks again, Peter.
You bet.
Peter, you mentioned that was a gut renovation of an existing building. In your experience, were they to have built something like that from the ground up, what percentage additional cost do you think they would have run into?
Given that it was a gut renovation in Connecticut, gut rehabs are comparable to new construction typically in terms of hard costs. So and plus they did interior revisions to create lobby and, you know, green rooms and dressing rooms and so forth. So I would say it's at least 80% of what a hard cost new construction job would be, and it may be even closer to the same cost.
Okay, so we'd probably be somewhere in that
Right.
$8 million range all told.
Great information.
Yep.
Cool. Okay,
Right.
we jump back into open space. Greg.
Open space, yes, this is where we may, you know, we may be short on information. So this may be an area where we want to add.
And I also think that we need to figure out what would be the healthiest information to provide to the RDA to
Yeah,
make the decision to leave the space open. You know, which is a viable decision. We just need to figure out if what we're giving them helps them do that at all, right? Because
I know.
we're showing them pretty pictures of parks and we're giving them estimated operating costs, but we don't really have anything beyond that right now to
I
help
know.
guide a decision.
I think I feel myself that it would be helpful to provide some construction costs, even though it's we're talking about pads in a park. It's not a structure, but it's construction cost. And I'm sure there's a per yard cost that we could estimate for the town. And I don't know, Mary, what do you think? Or Susmita, what do you, or Tom Dillon? I mean, we have estimated operating expenses, but I think
They're very loose.
we need some building costs too.
You know, the open space thing, you know, that's a hard decision, okay? If the council comes back and says, no theater, open space, okay? That's just a decision. That's a decision that someone makes. At that point, you are, you know, you're again, I think, just looking at what you want, because a park, it can be a park as it is with $0. You can spend millions on it and
Right,
make it
is a park.
either. So what do you want? And at some point, somebody or a group of people with the authority have to decide that this is what we're going to do. So I think,
You know,
again, we used a couple spaces that are interesting in that Cove, Bradley Point, and
Mill River.
Mill River provide a public access opportunity that is soft on dollar valuation. You know, when you go down to Bradley Park and you see hundreds to thousands of people walking up and down that park, that is an intrinsic value. You know, the Mill River Park is so interesting in that it really moves quite a distance and brings people. I mean, if you think about Mill River Park, you could literally imagine the same distance going from almost Short Beach, you know, up to the town center. I mean, it's quite large and long. It's a ribbon of park. And so I just...
Along a river.
Yeah, I mean, we were asked to show what open space looks like. And, you know, we have a couple open space options sitting there. And it, you know, that's it. That's what they are.
You know,
Go ahead, Mary.
I think another option that they may look at is, you know, when you're looking to build something there, how much open space would you like to go along with that too? That's another thing, you know, that's why the A2 survey is so helpful, and we'll have to really break it down and look at it, like where are the wetlands and all. But just in terms of, do you want something that takes up most of the space? Do you want something that enables there to be more open space? So I don't think it's an either or. I think it could be a combination.
The deed requires, I think it's 20% minimum.
Yeah, I was gonna say the deed requires 20%.
And the other thing, keep in mind
You
that,
don't have a lot of acres left.
I'm sorry.
I may be wrong in saying this, but I'm just putting it out here anyway. So if you're going to the council to present this slideshow, there is, like, you know what, there is a community vision that you have based on the phase 1. You know what the community wants. You come back to the slideshow. You provide a range of options from the smallest to the largest. But the council may not get a specific direction because there's so much information here. So if you as a group decide what is it that would best suit a site like Shakespeare in Stratford,
That's
and
not the job of the...
not thinking about London examples, that's what I meant. Like, what is more comparable? I'm not saying that you as a group should dictate what should go there, but
No.
what is a more comparable example, and then pick those examples and share with them. I think there's value to that, because now you're focusing their attention on specifics of few examples and asking them to think through this, than giving them 10 options. And then they go clueless after the presentation, not knowing, you know, what they would want to do again.
So it's a very good point. I have been determined to remain judgment free. I don't want to pretend to know what the council might want to do. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to even, however, you are the town planner, and Mary is the director of economic development and community development, and the mayor is the mayor. If you guys want to, you know, take a look at this draft, and maybe you could guide us in, you know, what what you think could, let's say we want to eliminate some items. We have too many, let's say that. And you guys could give us some advice as to, what you think we could pull.
I'm thinking more maybe, Greg, we, let this, once this meeting ends, maybe at the next meeting, we can all kind of take a look at them again and as a group say, are there any that you think we could pull out again because they're too similar to wean it down? And maybe as a group, looking at it one more time, we can make that decision or we won't. But maybe, because we all just, Tom put it all together for us and we're all taking it in, but maybe we just, at the next meeting, between now and then, just everybody kind of look at how they compare and maybe we come back as a group and say, maybe we can whittle it down a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, this is great work. By the way, Tom, I really appreciate everything. I mean, I'm very impressed by the presentation and I was going to call you to see what software you used. But all I'm saying is we want people to go back with the most important points. And in this case, they may not grab the most important or the gist of the information once the meeting is over.
I think that's a great point. And admittedly, I haven't gone through it as a real editor and tried to sort of, select certain information and try to make it consistent, like we could try to do if we try to find some business model bullet points that we want, or programming or percentage of revenues from different sources, whatever we decide. I think that's a great point too, Susmitha. Your viewpoint is right. It's like there's too much here, and too much could lead to confusion, and rather than helpful takeaways.
Yeah, or maybe I'm sorry to interrupt. What we do in planning projects presentation, Tom, like a POCD, we have a wealth of information. We attach this as a draft report, and then we take the main points and do like a 20 slide deck and show the main stuff from that draft.
Right.
Peter Wood?
I was just going to say, I think it is a good point. We don't want information overwhelmed so that it makes it more difficult for people to make a decision. Maybe we want to come up with how many of these suggestions to propose in this level of detail. Maybe it's a dozen, maybe it's 20 in total.
Yeah.
And think about what are the filters we're using to limit this. And certainly, I think as Tom pointed out, size is certainly one, location is another. What is appropriate in this location that some of these other things don't fit for? But I think we have to be careful about what those filters are. So that's my suggestion.
That's great. Well put. I like that. And I will say that Chris Pia, who met with me and Mary and the mayor sometime in the past month, I think it was, his off the cuff remark was 2 or 3 of each type, 2 or 3 comparables of each type, that is large facilities, small facilities, outdoor venue, or parks. So that's some guidance. We ended up with a lot more than that. Maybe we end up with 4 or something, whatever, but that's, and Chris is the chairman of the town council, in case anyone doesn't know that. So.
Right.
Okay, let's plow through. I think we could certainly be finished by 8 o'clock, if not before. But so if anyone's looking at the clock, wondering how long this is going to go on, I think another half hour would be plenty, or less.
Yeah, another half hour is a lot, Greg. I feel like we went through a lot, and maybe we just meet again in a month. I'm feeling like we're.
Okay. All right. Well, we're not finished the deck. It's been 6 months, a lot of work, and you guys can advise us again, when you want us to present to the town. So anyway, is there
Yeah,
anything else
Tom,
to
I can call
about,
you.
the parks, the open space, about costs? That's where we started this conversation. Are there any cost numbers that we can get? Susmitha, go ahead.
I will reach out to Tom Evans tomorrow to discuss this slide deck further. And, maybe I can give some feeders too on, where we can probably synthesize some of this stuff. And
Okay,
I will,
I'd like you to
it's not
include me
meant
in
to,
that.
he won't be, sorry?
I would like you to include me in that dialogue.
Okay, I can include you and maybe, if Mary wants to, she can also, I will include everyone. But I can't include everyone in the committee, right? Because it's not open meetings law or something. That's why I thought I would call him separately.
I think the town is allowed to communicate with the committee. We can't generate a discussion among the committee. You can communicate in one direction to the committee. We just can't have a meeting in response.
So can we end the meeting here and then pick it back up at the next meeting, the remaining stuff?
I think that could work, Greg, but why don't we have that meeting in 2 weeks instead of in a month? And I can make the updates and changes that we've suggested today. And then we can regroup knowing that we're at open space and then pick it up from there.
Okay, there is a key, before we adjourn then, there's a key item to discuss. And that is Tom Dillon's work with what we have called immediate suggestions and immediate options. This is an area which is frankly inconsistent with what we're trying to do, which is remain judgment free and objective. This is an area where Tom Dillon in particular, and I support his thinking here, which is basically, here's what can be done to the park immediately that would not preclude anything that might be developed in the park. So the question, without evaluating his thinking right now, the question is, how do we present it in a report that is intended to be objective and not advocating anything? That's what we're trying to do. So how do we do that? Tom, have you given it some thought? Tom Dillon, I'm thinking an addendum or even a separate report or something. I'm not really comfortable with it being part and parcel.
Well, I don't understand why, because no matter what happens in any decision moving forward, there is a mandatory 20% open space requirement. So the suggestion is to get going on that by integrating previously existing, totally approved and vetted ideas like complete streets and the Greenway, which the council is familiar with, is both approved and incorporated. So It goes a long way to fulfilling the obligation. It's an obligation of the town to make that available. And having that piece, bolted on is certainly an option. So, I do feel like it's not judgmental because it is not making a decision.
Any other thoughts on this?
I agree with Tom, absolutely. This group was tasked with come up with the research. So you have researched all the options, and it's now time to think critically and think what could be a better option, what could be an option that should be tossed out, and give some direction to the people who are looking for a direction.
And it also is limiting in the sense that you can't do anything. You have to obey these certain rules about the deeding, the public access, and we can dovetail it with already approved and vetted initiatives, such as the Greenway and complete streets. So, I think that is important. We cannot allow, and it's not a possibility to not move forward with an open space component to it. So the suggestion in any format we want to do is that, hey guys, don't forget, you can just go, you can go fulfill this obligation now. And you can do it in a way that's long-term compatible with the long-term planning process that's fit into active work that's already going on, and just move forward with that. And it can be done in a way that doesn't preclude any level of development. It doesn't stop it. It doesn't slow it down. It doesn't do anything. So that's the suggestion. And I think it's important that we include it in the report.
Okay.
It's not a judgment.
Tom Evans or Peter Wood?
I concur. I mean, I think that's fine. I feel like, towards the end of this discussion, we're realizing that we do need to be able to provide a little more directional information. And even though Tom's information is purely offset from the entire project, I still think it's critical that we get it out there. And, we're not saying do or die on anything. We're just saying this could be a good idea to kind of cross us over into the production phase of this.
Yeah.
I think they're all excellent ideas too, Tom. I mean, I love everything you've thrown down on that paper. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
I agree, and I fully support. We've talked about this from the beginning, Tom Dillon.
Yeah.
I just want it to be compatible with with the rest of our presentation.
Sure.
Okay, so the consensus is to adjourn. Before we adjourn, Mary, do you have any thoughts on, first of all, to whom this will be presented and how? In other words, is this going to the RDA, or is this a town council, or is this?
It's supposed to be the RDA and then the RDA to the town council.
Do you, so knowing what you know now, I'm sorry, Tom Evans.
I'm sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to cut you off. We are physically doing a presentation for the RDA, or
I don't know who's physically doing it. I think at this time of the meeting, it's a difficult time to talk about how we want to move forward. I think maybe we should do that at the next meeting.
Agreed.
I think we've had a long hour and a half, and to talk about the details of how we present is a little premature, I think, at this point.
Okay.
Maybe we can do it at our next meeting.
Agreed.
Okay, so we're not gonna have a time frame either. Okay. All right.
Well,
so
I think that Tom had suggested maybe meeting in 2 weeks. How about tomorrow? I look at the calendar and send something out and see what everyone's schedule is like.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you for your time.
Mary, can I suggest something? Can we do this meeting during lunchtime like we did the housing partnership meetings, or no?
Well, depending on the day,
That's up to Peter and Tom and Greg.
depending on the day, I can be available certain days during the day.
Well, why don't you let me know when that is?
Yeah, we will. Let's
Yeah,
let these
Tom
folks.
Dillon, I can do it also with plenty of notice. I can reserve that time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
why don't we
problem.
have this conversation via email just so everybody can.
Yeah,
can
I'll
get
send something out. And I think it's easier for people to do it during the day at times now that they're virtual. You don't have to go arrive someplace.
Right.
So
That's great, thank you.
That's fine.
All right, who's gonna move that we adjourn?
I think Mary did, but I'll move that we adjourn.
I'm not allowed to technically, Tom.
And I
All
second
right.
Peter. And Tom Evans
second.
seconded. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks, all.
you.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.